The air in my dining room felt heavier than usual, as if it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. I, Elena Marquez, stood at the stove, stirring a pot of chili while my heart raced like I was running from something I couldn't name. Tonight wasn't just dinner. It was a collision of worlds, and I was terrified of what might spill out. I'd invited James Carter and Michael and Gwen, the new couple who'd moved into the house across the street, for dinner. In our small Ohio town, where everyone knew everyone's business, their arrival had stirred whispers. A gay couple, openly affectionate, holding hands on their porch swing. It was a sight that turned heads at the grocery store and church alike. I wasn't sure why I'd invited them. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was guilt for the way my neighbors' eyes narrowed when they passed by. Or maybe it was the nagging feeling that my own beliefs, rooted in years of tradition, were starting to crack. The doorbell chimed, sharp and bright, cutting through the hum of my thoughts. I wiped my hands on my apron, took a deep breath, and opened the door. James stood there, all charm and confidence, his blonde hair catching the porch light. "Elena, you didn't have to go all out," he said, holding up a bottle of Pinot Noir. Michael, quieter, offered a shy smile and a small bouquet of wildflowers. Their warmth disarmed me, but I couldn't shake the tension coiling in my chest. Come in," I said, ushering them into my modest home. The dining room smelled of cumin and roasted tomatoes, and the table was set with my mother's old china, something I hadn't used since she passed. We sat, and the conversation started lightly. The weather, their move from Chicago, the creaky charm of their new fixer-upper. James was a lawyer, I learned, with a quick laugh and a knack for storytelling. Michael, an artist, spoke softly about his paintings, his dark eyes flickering with a depth I couldn't quite read. But as the meal progressed, I felt the weight of the unspoken. My upbringing in a conservative Latino family had drilled certain truths into me. Truths about marriage, about what was right. I'd always nodded along, never questioning. Even when my cousin Sophia came out years ago and my family shut her out. I'd stayed silent then, and the guilt still gnawed at me. Now, sitting across from James and Michael, I wondered if I was betraying those old truths, or if they'd been betraying me all along. "You've got a beautiful home," Michael said, glancing at the framed photos on the wall. One caught his eye, me and Sophia, laughing at a family picnic years ago. "Who's that?" he asked, his voice gentle but curious. I hesitated. "My cousin, Sophia. We don't talk much anymore." The words felt like a confession, and I saw James and Michael exchange a glance. They didn't press, but the air shifted, like we were all standing at the edge of something deeper. Dinner flowed, and so did the wine. James told a story about their first date, a disastrous attempt at ice skating that ended with Michael sprawled on the rink, laughing so hard he couldn't get up. I found myself laughing too, the knot in my chest loosening. But as we cleared the plates and I brought out the dessert, a homemade flan I'd spent hours perfecting, I felt the conversation teetering toward something raw. "So, Elena," James said, leaning back in his chair, his tone still warm but pointed, "what made you invite us tonight? I mean, we're the new guys in town, and well, we've noticed not everyone's thrilled about us being here." The question hit like a stone through glass. I froze, the flan trembling slightly in my hands. I wanted to say it was just neighborly kindness, but that wasn't the whole truth. "I guess I wanted to know you," I said finally, my voice quieter than I meant. "To understand." Michael's eyes softened, but there was a flicker of something else. Resolve, maybe, or defiance. "Understand what?" he asked, not accusingly, but with a weight that demanded honesty. I set the flan down, my hands shaking. "I don't know," I admitted. "I grew up with rules. Ideas about what's right, what's wrong. And you challenged that. Not in a bad way, just in a way I'm not used to." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. James reached for Michael's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, and I felt a pang I couldn't name. Not jealousy, not judgment, just a longing for something I didn't fully understand. "Let me tell you something," James said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "When I was a kid, I thought I'd never get to have this, a home, a partner, a life where I could just be. I spent years hiding, pretending, hating myself because people like your neighbors told me I was wrong. Michael nodded, his gaze fixed on the table. And I spent years running, he added. From my family, from myself. My parents, they're Vietnamese immigrants. They thought being gay was a choice I could just unmake. When I came out, they didn't speak to me for 2 years. Their words landed like stones in still water, rippling through me. I thought of Sophia, of the way I'd let her slip out of my life without a fight. I thought of the sermons I'd sat through, the ones that called people like James and Michael sinners. I thought of the flan on the table, made with my mother's recipe, and how she'd loved me fiercely but would have turned away from this moment. I'm sorry, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I don't know what to say, but I'm sorry. James smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. You don't have to apologize for the world, Elena, but you can choose what you believe. That's what tonight's about, isn't it? I nodded, tears prickling my eyes. The flan sat untouched, the candlelight flickering across our faces. I didn't know it yet, but this dinner, this moment, was the beginning of something that would unravel everything I thought I knew. The candles had burned low, casting long shadows across the dining room. The flan sat in the center of the table, its caramel glaze glistening, but none of us reached for it. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks, and I knew we were teetering on the edge of something bigger than polite conversation. James leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on mine. Elena, you said you wanted to understand. So let me ask you something. What do you think love is? The question caught me off guard, like a spotlight swinging onto me in a dark room. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Love was what? My parents' marriage, steady but rigid, bound by duty? The fleeting crushes of my youth, none of which ever lasted? Or was it something else, something I'd never let myself see? I think it's about commitment, I said finally, my voice unsteady. About building a life together, through the hard stuff. Michael nodded, but his expression was unreadable. That's part of it, he said. But for me, love is also about freedom. The freedom to be who you are, without hiding. To be seen and still chosen. His words hit me like a quiet revelation. I thought of Sophia again, of the way she'd always seemed to glow when she talked about her girlfriend, even as our family turned their backs. I called it reckless back then, but now I wondered if it was courage. James squeezed Michael's hand, then looked at me. When we moved here, we knew it wouldn't be easy. Small towns, they can be tough. But we chose this place because we wanted a home, not just a house. And every day, we choose each other, even when people stare or whisper. I shifted in my seat, the weight of their words pressing against the walls I'd built around my beliefs. Growing up, I'd been taught that love had rules, man and woman, sanctioned by God, sealed by marriage. Anything else was a deviation, a sin. But looking at James and Michael, their hands clasped, their eyes full of quiet strength, I couldn't see anything sinful. I saw two people who'd fought to be together, who'd carved out a space for themselves in a world that didn't always make room. Can I ask you something personal? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They nodded, and I took a deep breath. How do you deal with the judgment? The people who say you're wrong. Michael's face softened, but there was a fire in his eyes. At first, it hurt. A lot. My parents, my old church, they made me feel like I was broken. But then I met James, and he showed me I wasn't. We built our own family, our own faith. The judgment still stings, but it doesn't define us. James chuckled, but it was laced with something heavier. You learn to pick your battles. Like, last week, Mrs. Thompson from down the street gave us this look when we were gardening together. I wanted to march over and give her a piece of my mind, but Michael just laughed and said, let her stare. She's missing out on the best roses in town. I smiled, but my chest ached. I thought of all the times I'd stayed silent when my neighbors gossiped about those men across the street. I told myself it wasn't my place to speak up, that I didn't know enough. But sitting here, listening to James and Michael, I realized silence was a choice too, and not a neutral one. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Michael's latest painting, a vibrant abstract inspired by the Ohio River. James's pro bono work for a local youth center. But the weight of their earlier words lingered. As I poured more wine, I felt a question bubbling up, one I wasn't sure I had the courage to ask. Did you ever lose people? I said finally, my voice cracking. Family, friends, because of who you are? James's smile faded, and he nodded. My older brother. We were close growing up, but when I came out, he said he couldn't support my lifestyle. We haven't spoken in 5 years. Michael's jaw tightened. For me, it was my whole family for a while. They're better now, but it took time. And some friends, they just drifted away. It's like they didn't know how to fit me into their world anymore. I swallowed hard, thinking of Sophia. I'd let her drift away too, hadn't I? Not because I hated her, but because I didn't know how to bridge the gap between what I'd been taught and what I felt. I have a cousin, I said, the words tumbling out. Sophia. She's gay, and when she came out, my family, they cut her off. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say, and now I don't even know where she is. The confession hung in the air, raw and heavy. James reached across the table, his hand hovering near mine, not touching but close enough to feel like a lifeline. That's hard, he said softly, but it's not too late to reach out. She might need to hear from you more than you know. Tears stung my eyes, and I blinked them back. The flan still sat untouched, the candles flickering lower. Outside, the twilight had deepened into night, and I felt like I was standing at a crossroads. One foot in the world I'd always known, the other in a place I was only beginning to understand. As we finally dug into the dessert, the sweetness of the caramel couldn't mask the bitterness of my regret, but it also tasted like hope, like the possibility of something new. The flan melted on my tongue, its creamy sweetness a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. James and Michael ate quietly, their faces softened by the candlelight, but I could feel the weight of our earlier conversation lingering like a pulse. I'd opened a door I couldn't close, and the truth was, I didn't want to. Elena, Michael said, setting down his spoon. Can I ask you something now? His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it, like he was weighing whether I could handle what came next. Of course, I said, my heart thudding. When you invited us here, did you expect us to be different? He asked. Like, did you think we'd be some stereotype you'd seen on TV, or did you just not know what to expect? The question stung, not because it was harsh, but because it was honest. I thought back to the whispers in town, about those men with their city ways, their loud laughs, their unapologetic love. I told myself I wasn't like my neighbors, that I was open-minded. But had I really been? I guess I didn't know, I admitted, my voice small. I've never really known anyone like you two. Not up close. And I think maybe I was afraid you'd be too different. Or that I wouldn't know how to talk to you. James laughed, not unkindly. Fair enough. When we moved here, I was afraid we'd be too much for this town. Too loud, to us. But you know what? Sometimes being yourself is the only way to find out who's willing to meet you halfway. His words landed like a challenge, and I felt my cheeks flush. I thought of my life, safe, predictable, hemmed in by the expectations of my family, my church, my community. I'd always played by the rules, but sitting here with James and Michael, I wondered what I'd missed by never stepping out of line. Michael leaned forward, his dark eyes searching mine. You said you don't know where Sophia is. Have you tried looking for her? The question felt like a knife, not because it was cruel, but because it cut straight to my guilt. No, I said, barely audible. I didn't know how. Or maybe I was scared of what I'd find. James nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. When I lost my brother, I kept hoping he'd reach out first, that he'd change his mind. But sometimes, you have to be the one to take the first step, even if it's messy. I stared at the flan, the golden caramel blurring as tears welled up again. What if she hates me? I whispered. What if I let her down too much? Michael reached across the table, and this time, he did touch my hand. A brief, warm squeeze. She might be angry. She might need time. But you won't know until you try. And even if it's hard, it's worth it. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in with the weight of my choices. I thought of Sophia's laugh, her fierce spirit, the way she'd always made me feel like I could be more than I was. I'd let her go because I was too afraid to question the rules I'd been taught. But now, sitting with James and Michael, I saw those rules for what they were, walls, not truths. The conversation shifted again, and we talked about lighter things. Michael's dream of opening a small gallery, James's love for old jazz records. but the seed they'd planted was taking root. I couldn't stop thinking about Sophia, about the years I'd let slip by, about the person I'd been too afraid to be. As the night wore on, James glanced at his watch. "We should probably head out," he said, his tone reluctant. "But Elena, this was more than we expected." "Thank you." I walked them to the door, the bouquet of wildflowers they'd brought still sitting on the counter. As they stepped onto the porch, Michael turned back. "If you ever want to talk more, or if you find Sophia, we're here." "Okay." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. They walked across the street, their silhouettes blending into the darkness, and I stood there, the cool night air brushing against my skin. For the first time in years, I felt awake, like I'd been sleepwalking through my life, and someone had finally shaken me. Back inside, I cleared the table, the remnants of the flan and wine glasses a reminder of the night's wait. I sat down with my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. Sophia's name was still in my contacts, though I hadn't called it in years. I typed out a message, then deleted it. Typed another, then deleted that too. Finally, I wrote, "Sophia, it's Elena. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I didn't send it. Not yet. But as I sat there, the candlelight long gone, I knew I would. The dinner had changed something in me. Not all at once, but enough to make me question everything. James and Michael had shown me what it meant to live bravely, to love without apology. And I wanted to learn how to do the same. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness I couldn't shake, like the dinner with James and Michael had left a residue on my soul. The message to Sophia still sat unsent on my phone, a blinking cursor taunting me with its silence. I went through my routine, coffee, toast, the hum of the radio, but my mind kept drifting back to their words, their hands intertwined, the way they'd looked at each other with a love so fierce it felt like defiance. At work, the fluorescent lights of the library where I worked as a clerk buzzed overhead, amplifying my unease. I shelved books absent-mindedly, my thoughts circling back to Sophia. I remembered the summer we were 16, sneaking out to the lake to swim under the stars, laughing until our sides hurt. She'd always been the brave one, the one who'd jump in first, while I hesitated on the shore. Why hadn't I jumped for her when she needed me? By lunch, I couldn't stand it anymore. I pulled out my phone and searched for Sophia online. It wasn't hard to find her. She was a graphic designer now, living in Portland. Her social media was full of vibrant art, photos of her with a woman who had a bright smile and a cascade of curly hair. They looked happy, whole. I scrolled through years of her life I'd missed, each post a reminder of my silence. That evening, I walked across the street to James and Michael's house. I didn't know why, exactly, just that I needed to talk, to keep the thread of last night alive. Michael answered the door, paint smudged on his cheek, his hands dusted with charcoal. "Elena," he said, surprised but warm. "Come in." Their home was a work in progress, with drop cloths and paint cans scattered across the living room. James appeared from the kitchen, a dish towel over his shoulder. "You're just in time for leftovers," he joked, but his eyes searched mine, like he could sense the storm inside me. "I found Sophia," I blurted out, sitting on their worn leather couch. "She's in Portland. She's got a life. A good one, I think." Michael sat across from me, his expression soft. "That's great, Elena. Did you reach out?" I shook my head, my fingers twisting together. "I'm scared. What if she doesn't want to hear from me? What if I'm too late?" James sat next to Michael, their knees touching. "You're not too late until you give up," he said. "When I reached out to my brother last year, I didn't expect him to respond. But he did. It's not perfect, but it's a start." Their words gave me courage, but also stirred a deeper question. "How do you do it?" I asked. "How do you keep choosing each other, even when the world makes it hard?" Michael smiled, a quiet, wistful thing. "It's not always easy. There are days when the stares, the comments, they get under your skin. But then I look at James, and I remember why I keep going. He's my home." James leaned into him, their shoulders brushing. "And Michael's mine. But it's not just about us. It's about building something bigger, showing people that love doesn't have to fit their mold to be real." I thought of my parents, their marriage a fortress of tradition, unyielding but cold. I thought of the church I still attended, its sermons growing harder to sit through. And I thought of Sophia, who'd chosen her own path, even when it cost her everything. Before I left, Michael handed me a small sketch, a quick drawing of the three of us at my dining table, the candlelight casting soft shadows. A reminder, he said. You're already taking steps. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the sketch propped against a vase. I picked up my phone and sent the message to Sophia. Sophia, it's Elena. I'm sorry. Can we talk? My finger hovered over the send button, my heart pounding. Then I pressed it, and the message flew into the void. The wait was agonizing. Every ping of my phone made my stomach lurch, but no reply came. Days passed, and I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the ache. James and Michael checked in, inviting me to a barbecue they were hosting. I went, if only to escape my own head. Their backyard was small but lively, filled with neighbors I recognized, and some I didn't. Mrs. Thompson, the one who'd given them that look, was there, awkwardly holding a plate of potato salad. James worked the grill, his laugh booming, while Michael mingled, his quiet charm drawing people in. I watched them, marveling at how they'd turned a weary town into a community, even if just for one afternoon. As the sun set, I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Sophia. But then, as I helped clear plates, James pulled me aside. You're doing the hard thing, he said. That's what matters. Keep going. I nodded, clinging to his words like a lifeline. The barbecue ended with laughter and music, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged to something bigger than my doubts. But the silence from Sophia lingered, a reminder that some bridges take time to rebuild. A week later, I was shelving books at the library when my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped a stack of novels when I saw the name. Sophia. Her message was short, cautious. Elena, it's been a long time. I'm not sure what to say, but yeah, we can talk. My hands shook as I typed a reply, suggesting a video call that weekend. She agreed, and the days until then felt like an eternity. I kept busy, helping James and Michael with their gallery project, a small space they'd rented downtown for Michael's art. Watching them work together, their banter light but their purpose clear, made me ache for connection. I wanted to rebuild what I'd lost with Sophia, but I was terrified of facing her hurt. Saturday came, and I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, my heart in my throat. When Sophia's face appeared on the screen, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray, but her eyes were the same, sharp, guarded, but warm at the edges. Elena, she said, her voice steady but distant. It's good to see you. I'm sorry. I blurted out, the words spilling like water from a broken dam. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I should have been there for you. I should have fought for you. She looked away, her jaw tight. It hurt, you know, when you didn't call, didn't write. I thought you were different. I wanted to be, I said, tears streaming down my face. But I was scared. I was wrong. I let what I was taught get in the way of what I felt. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, and I braced for her to end the call. But then she sighed, and her expression softened. I'm not going to lie, it's going to take time. But I'm glad you reached out. I've missed you. We talked for hours, catching up on years of lost time. She told me about her partner, Lila, about their life in Portland, about the family they'd built with friends who'd become their chosen kin. I told her about James and Michael, about the dinner that had cracked my world open. By the end, we were laughing, tentative but real, and she promised to visit Ohio soon. The call ended, and I felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried for years. I texted James and Michael, thanking them for pushing me to reach out. They invited me over, and I found them in their backyard, stringing fairy lights for the gallery opening. You did it, James said, grinning as he handed me a lemonade. How do you feel? Like I'm starting over, I said, and I meant it. The gallery opening was a week later, and the small space was packed. Michael's paintings lined the walls, bold, vibrant works that seemed to pulse with life. I saw Mrs. Thompson there, her expression softer than before, and I wondered if she was starting to see what I was seeing. That love, in all its forms, was a gift, not a threat. As the night wound down, James pulled me aside. You know, Elena, you're part of this now. You're building something too. I looked at him, then at Michael, who was laughing with a group of locals. I thought of Sophia, of the call that had begun to mend what was broken. And I realized James was right. I was building something. Not just a connection with Sophia, but a new way of seeing the world, one where love didn't have to fit a mold to be real. That night, I went to church for the first time in weeks. The sermon was about forgiveness, and I listened, but I didn't feel the old weight of guilt. Instead, I felt a quiet resolve. I'd spent years letting others define my beliefs, but now I was ready to define them myself. As I walked home under the stars, I thought of James and Michael, of Sophia and Lila, of the courage it took to live authentically. I wasn't there yet, but I was moving toward it, one step at a time. The weeks that followed felt like a slow awakening. Sophia and I texted regularly now, small messages that grew into longer conversations. She sent me photos of her art, of Lila baking bread, of their cat sprawled across a sunny windowsill. Each message was a thread, stitching us back together, but I knew the fabric of our relationship would always bear the scars of my silence. James and Michael became a fixture in my life. I'd stop by their house after work, helping with small projects or just sitting on their porch, listening to James's stories or Michael's quiet insights. They were different, yet perfectly matched, James's bold energy balancing Michael's introspective calm. Watching them, I began to see love not as a rule to follow, but as a choice to make every day. One evening, as we painted the gallery walls, Michael asked about my family. I told him about my parents, their strict Catholic upbringing, the way they'd shaped my world with absolutes. I loved them, I said, but I think they were afraid of anything that didn't fit their idea of right. Michael nodded, wiping paint from his hands. My parents were the same. It's why I left home so young. But you know, sometimes people change. Not always, but sometimes. His words stayed with me. I thought of my mother, who'd passed years ago, and my father, now in a nursing home. I hadn't visited him in months, not since his memory started fading. But the next day, I drove to see him, carrying a photo of Sophia and me from that long-ago picnic. He was frail, his eyes cloudy, but he smiled when he saw me. "Elena," he said, his voice thin. I showed him the photo, told him about Sophia, about how I was trying to make things right. He listened, his hands trembling, and for a moment, I thought he understood. "Family's important," he said finally, and I chose to believe he meant it. Back in town, the gallery was thriving. Michael's art drew visitors from beyond our small community, and James's charm turned skeptics into allies. Even Mrs. Thompson started coming by, bringing cookies and asking about Michael's process. I saw the town changing, slowly, the way a river carves a new path through stone. But change wasn't easy. At church, I started speaking up during Bible study, questioning the verses used to condemn people like James and Michael. Some nodded, others frowned, and one woman walked out. It hurt, but it also felt right, like I was finally standing up for something. One night, James and Michael invited me to dinner at their place. The table was set with mismatched plates, the air filled with the scent of roasted chicken. As we ate, they told me about their wedding, a small ceremony in Chicago with close friends and chosen family. "We didn't need everyone's approval," James said. "Just the people who mattered." I thought of Sophia's upcoming visit. She and Lila were coming for the weekend, and I was nervous, excited, terrified. I wanted to show her I'd changed, that I was trying to be better, but I also knew trust took time, and I was ready to earn it. As we cleared the plates, Michael brought out a cake, chocolate, with a messy swirl of frosting. "To new beginnings," he said, raising a glass. We toasted, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. Later, as I walked home, I looked at the stars and thought about the beliefs I'd once held so tightly. They'd been my anchor, but also my chain. Now, I was learning to let go, to build a faith rooted in love, not fear. James and Michael had shown me that, and Sophia was teaching me too. I wasn't done growing, but I was on my way. The day Sophia arrived, I stood on my porch, my hands twisting in my apron. The air was crisp, the Ohio autumn painting the trees in gold and red. When her car pulled up, I saw her first, taller than I remembered, her smile tentative but real. Lila stepped out next, her curls bouncing, her eyes warm as she took Sophia's hand. We hugged, and it felt like coming home. "Elena," Sophia said, her voice thick. "I didn't think we'd get here." "Me neither," I said, tears spilling over. But I'm so glad we did. I'd invited James and Michael to join us for dinner, and the five of us crowded around my dining table, the same one where this journey began. The meal was simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a salad, but the laughter and stories made it feel like a feast. Sophia talked about her art, Lila about her work as a teacher, and James and Michael shared their plans for the gallery. As we ate, I watched Sophia and Lila, their easy affection, the way they leaned into each other. I thought of the years I'd lost, the pain I'd caused by staying silent. But I also saw the years ahead, the chance to be part of their lives. After dinner, we moved to the living room with coffee and pie. Sophia pulled out her phone, showing us photos of their life in Portland. One caught my eye, a picture of them at a pride parade, rainbow flags waving, their faces alight with joy. That day, Sophia said, I felt free, like I could finally be me. Lila squeezed her hand, and I knew I'd follow her anywhere. James raised his glass. To being yourself, no matter what. We clinked glasses, and I felt a lump in my throat. I'm sorry, I said, looking at Sophia, for not being there, for letting fear win. She reached for my hand, her grip firm. You're here now? That's what matters. Michael leaned forward, his voice quiet but steady. Elena, you invited us into your home when you didn't have to. You reached out to Sophia when it was hard. That's not fear. That's courage. His words settled over me, warm and true. I looked around the room, at Sophia and Lila, at James and Michael, and saw a family, not bound by blood but by choice. They'd shown me that love wasn't about rules or approval. It was about showing up, about choosing each other, even when it was hard. As the night wound down, Sophia and Lila headed to their hotel, promising to meet for breakfast. James and Michael stayed to help clean up, and as we washed dishes, James grinned at me. You know, Elena, you're kind of a badass. I laughed, shaking my head. I'm just trying to keep up with you too. When they left, I sat alone in my quiet house, the sketch Michael had drawn still on the counter. I thought of the beliefs I'd once held, the ones that had kept me small. They were gone now, replaced by something stronger, a faith in love, in courage, in the messy beauty of being human. The next morning, Sophia and I walked to the river, just like we had as kids. The water was calm, reflecting the morning sun. I'm proud of you, she said, bumping my shoulder. You're different now. So are you, I said, and we smiled, the weight of the past lighter than it had ever been. That dinner with James and Michael had changed everything. It had shown me that love could break down walls, that courage could rebuild bridges. And as I stood by the river with Sophia, I knew I'd spend the rest of my life choosing love over fear every single day.